It's a pipeline that takes 20 years. From the day they start going to school, the day they get a job outside of a degree. It's a pipeline that we cannot afford to screw up. We can't afford to make whole-scale changes to it without thinking it through, without understanding this cycle. And the cycle is very simple if you think about it. And it's one that's worked for hundreds of years, and it's one that's one of the true global systems that we have today. Scientific research is a global enterprise. The problems are way too complex for any one person. They're all working on it together. It crosses race, it crosses geographic boundaries, it crosses sex, it crosses age groups, it crosses religion, it crosses language. All these researchers around the world are working today on the most tough problems you could ever imagine, trying to understand the most basic questions. They're producing the raw materials that makes life exciting for all of us, that gives us the MP3 players and the high-definition plasma screens and the supercomputers on our desk, and of course the BlackBerries on our hip. Now, go back and think about this for a second. Everything that's in the BlackBerry today, the radio technology, the solid-state physics, the screen technology, the computer programming, all that goes back to basic physical discoveries. Whenever we brought two different things together and we're able to explain them with the same basic effect, the same basic equation, we had a revolution. When Faraday discovered that electricity and magnetism were basically the same thing. And back then they didn't know that. They thought that magnetism was one thing, lightning was another, static electricity was something else, and chemical electricity was something else altogether. And then they discovered this thing called electromagnetism. Faraday showed that it was the same effect. And then Maxwell came up with the equations. This all happened before the 1900s. Those equations predicted radio waves, a propagating wave. And it was entrepreneurs like Marconi and others who were able to take that prediction and make it a whole industry and change the world. Well, this has happened over and over again through history. We had at the beginning of the 1900s, 1905 being a very important year, where Einstein explained the photoelectric effect, came up with special relativity, and explained Brownian motion. There is a small group, believe me, it's a small group, of very talented explorers. Yes, we have explorers still today. These people explore the natural universe. They explore how things work and why they work that way. They're trying to figure out the fundamental laws that make things work and explain them to us mathematically. There's a small group, and they're working on the hardest problems. And quite frankly, we couldn't understand what they're working on. But what we should remember is that when we fund that work, when we fund excellence in that work, those researchers do their job, and they do it extremely well. And the trick is to have them do that job at Canadian universities, to be able to give them the opportunity to do what they love to do and explore those areas that most of us don't even realize are happening around us. But we need them to do that. Why? Because they draw the best graduate students. And those graduate students are basically undergraduate students. And they go to those schools because of the research that's going there, the reputation of the researchers, the reputation of the graduate students that come out of that university. And they go there and they get experienced. And they get inspired. And they learn things that they never knew. Some of those students are going to stay at that university and continue the research, get their higher degrees. Some of those students are going to remain there or go to other universities and teach and do that research all over again. The side effect of doing that great research is you attract a critical mass of great researchers. The side effect of that is you attract a critical mass of great graduate students. And the side effect of that is you build a university of great reputation that attracts the best students who get inspired because they go to the campus that has the best research going on. Now, the technology transfer part happens every year, and it's in a pipeline. Those students, when they graduate and they go into industry, when they go into government, when they go into media, the arts, wherever they happen to go, they take the latest generation of inspiration, knowledge, training, technique, and they bring it into our lives. And they make it relevant for us. And that's how technology transfer works. It's very rare that you have technology that goes straight from the research laboratory to industry. Remember I told you that's less than 5%. On the other hand, the world would not function, it would collapse if we shut those doors and didn't have those students graduating and entering the workforce every year. Now, again, go back to that simple model. You fund the very best researchers, and you fund them extremely well, because that's the reason they're going to come to Canada. And you want them here. The next thing you do is you make sure that they have the laboratories and equipment they need to do their job and to do it well. Then you need to fund their students. And believe me, we're not talking about a lot of people here. When that happens, then you have critical mass in our universities. And that will draw through the best students and will make the best students. And those students will enter the workforce and change everything for us. It's very important that we understand this and we don't let ourselves slip back into thinking that somehow that we're not getting our share, that we're not getting a good return on our tax dollars, because we are. In the world scale of things, when you think of how many people Canada is made up from, I think you'd be surprised to understand how Canada is respected around the world for its research. And now we're starting to see more and more that countries around the world are respecting Canada for the quality of its workforce, for the quality of its people, because they're now investing more and more in the country. And why do I keep saying this over and over again? Well, because every time I grapple with this problem, I keep hearing this issue. How can we make research more relevant? And quite frankly, the only thing we need to make more relevant is our understanding of how it's done and what it's done for us. And as we come into the 21st century, same situation that happened 100 years ago is occurring today. We're running out of basic understanding. We're taking what we know to its limits. We're going about as far as we can go in optimizing, in producing the last derivative effect. In fact, there's been something called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law, I'm sure some of you have heard of this. It was a prediction by one of the founders of Intel that the geometry, or the number of transistors we can put on an integrated circuit, about doubles every 18 months. And on the average, that's held true for a long time. But we're reaching the limits of it, because as we make those geometries, the size of the transistors smaller and smaller, we're going to get to a point where the transistors are the size of atoms, and we can't make them any smaller. That point, by the way, if you plot Moore's Law, is between 2010 and 2020. It's going to happen. There's no getting around it. And when that happens, the big prime driver of the Silicon Age will come to a halt. And it's the same thing that happened 100 years ago with the technology of the age. Steam engines, horses. Basic science, at that point, started to discover new things, and we're discovering new things now. And they hold the promise for a whole new understanding of our universe around us. And if that occurs, then we'll have a whole new generation of discovery and growth on a whole new technology that we can't even predict today. But we can predict one thing. If we fund those systems, if we fund the researchers, their research, their students well, and build those critical masses in Canada, Canada will be able to interpret that information and take advantage of it in our industry and in our lives, and make sure that we're still relevant in the future to come. Thank you very much.